In this episode, we start off by making space on the pilot's side, and then we're taking stuff from the drinker's side and putting it on the pilot's side to make space on the drinker's side. Oh, and Kaz is wearing Smurf hands. I've just taken the spare wheel off. It was fastened with 2 bolts to the bracket, and then this bracket was fastened to the rim, and I'm assuming this is some form of a slidey bracket that goes into the channel here, so that you can maybe tip the wheel up to there and push it into there and then secure it to the actual frame. And the next thing I want to do is I want to see if I can remove this spare wheel bracket, and it looks to be fairly simple. There seems to be 2 bolts there. I'm sure there's some other things too, but it doesn't seem too difficult. Now this might seem like an easy job at first. Just undo the nuts and bolts and you're done. But somehow there's always something in the way, or your tool doesn't fit. No laughing, lads. We know this is way too familiar. Anyway, you end up going back and forth between your toolbox and what you're working on. Then you start taking a thing off. But that thing is blocked by another thing, which has another size fastener. And once you have the tools for that one, then you find that that thing is blocked by another thing. On top of all this, you live in the real world, and you're not a hipster on YouTube who can willy-nilly chuck stuff across the garage and yell "in the bin" in an Australian accent. So you try to take the parts off in a way that doesn't damage them. Because if you had to put them back, you couldn't afford to buy new parts. Now you're there, gently prodding a thing like a nervous French chef touching his souffle, hoping it won't collapse, while sitting in a huge pile of various tools that you forgot why they're there. In the end, you manage to unbolt one thing after another, and suddenly you realize that you're taking off the rear fog light so you can change the windscreen wiper because you haven't figured out how to unscrew the radiator hose. In this case, the exhaust is in the way of the bolts for the spare wheel. But you can't get the exhaust off because the rearmost bracket is in the way to slide off the silencer. To get the bracket off, I need to undo the 2 bolts on the frame, which are hidden by the load sensory gubbins. So we need to take all of those off. In the end, the most helpful tool is a friend that can help. With some help, things started going a lot faster, and one thing came off the truck, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next. In the end, victory was ours, and we feasted through the night. No, that actually didn't happen, the last part. We'd been too tired anyway. Okay, we've made quite a bit of space here, and that'll be very handy. And here's all the parts that we've taken off. I have put the bolts and nuts back where they came from, so I don't have to store them separately or go look for them when I need to. So let me tell you what we have removed. This rusty piece of hunk there is the exhaust. It fits into there, that end, and then that end goes into the muffler, and then the exhaust pipe thingy there. The front, that bit, was held in place with this bracket, fairly heavy duty, that came from there. At the back, it was held in place with these 2 bolts there and there, which was held up in the there, and that was a bit of a pain to get out because the load sensitive gubbins are in there, so we had to take the whole arm thingy off and even loosen the cylinder there. Once you take those off, it comes off quite easily. There's the 2 bolts if you can see them, the top one and the bottom one a little bit further down. Yeah, that was a bit of a faff to get out, but it worked fine. Then the spare wheel carrier, quite a hefty thing. It was fastened here. These ones have nuts on the back, so if I turn this over, you will see that the nuts and bolts are back on there, and they are 22, not 24. Yeah, let's not talk about that anymore. And these ones have captive nuts on the back, so you can just buzz them out. Now the problem with this is that it's at an angle, so it's very difficult to get a tool into there because they are quite close to the edge. So yeah, that was a bit of a faff too. And they're also Loctited in place, so they don't want to easily give. And as I said earlier, that the spare wheel is attached to the carrier with these two bolts, and then this bracket goes into there. I don't know how much this weighs, but it's quite heavy duty stuff, so I think there's a lot of weight that has been shed here, but no doubt we're going to put it back with other gubbins. And there's the spare wheel. Right, space. I have disconnected the feed and return line, the hose that I believe is a breather hose, I haven't followed where it goes, and the fuel level sender unit. I have taped up the hole, cap is on, the standpipes and stuff and the fuel level thingy is wrapped up in a plastic bag, ready for another day. And now I'm going to loosen up the straps and see where that takes me. It's not like I know what I'm doing. The nuts on the underside is a doddle to remove. That is, if your definition of doddle includes undoing nuts that are caked in mud and swallowing a fibrous diet of Mother Earth. The straps on the top are held in place by a pin which has a split pin on each end. If you've ever come across a split pin on a rotating pin, you're most likely very familiar with this situation where you're chasing the split pin end of the pin with either a pair of needle nose pliers or a screwdriver around and around and around like a never-ending rerun of the Benny Hill show. Both situations are as unbearable as each other. Eventually you manage to channel your frustration to using the bashy stick on the split pin and eventually the pin instead of your face to numb the pain. It's these small victories that make life worth living. the same size. Oh. Well, today has been a fairly productive day, and there's no fuel tank here anymore. It's gone quite well, it's been quite easy. The front bracket, which was here, came off quite easily. This one is a little bit more of a problem because the bracket itself has got captive nuts in it, but the other side doesn't. The other side's got nuts and bolts, and in practice that means that you have to take out the bolts from this one and the bracket, and then go to the other side and take out those bolts and nuts and put them in here. We solved that by putting a scissor lift jack there between that bar and up there. The tank itself is in quite good condition. I can't see any rust on the inside. The brackets and the straps are quite okay too. The straps have a little bit of rust on them. I buzzed them quickly with the flap disc and a wire brush thingy, and gave them a bit of zinc primer, so that hopefully they'll stay okay-ish for now. The hoses are just lying down here. They are plugged with a bolt, and the hose clamps are tightened. So that's this side done. We still need to do something about the battery box because it's in the way here, but that's another day. So let me move the lights and go to the other side and show you what's happened there. Yesterday there was nothing here, now there's the brackets. The rear bracket, as I said, is a straight swap from there. Just the bolts have to come with the brackets, and then the nuts and bolt has to go to the other side. This bracket is also a pretty straight fit with a bit of a caveat. The existing holes that were there are the right distance height-wise, i.e. vertically, but they are 95 millimeters too close compared to the other side. I have checked the tank, but I haven't trial fitted it yet, and I think it will work. Trial fit will tell us whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, I'll either have to make a bracket or something to move this outrigger forward or backwards from the other one, or drill new holes. As far as I know, you're allowed to drill on the side, but not on the top and the bottom of a U-beam frame like this. However, I need to check the Mercedes modification manual if that is actually allowed or not before I do anything. If you run into a situation like this, that might be an option, but check with your vehicle first. Don't take my word for it. I'm just a nobody on the internet, not an expert on anything like this. I'm just making things up as I go along. Anyway, the straps and the rubber thingies are resting in the garage, ready for the next session. The tank is now on the driver's side, left hand side, just propped up on the outriggers, the bars. There is 2 ribs here for your pleasure, and they seem to fit just fine in there, and I think that's a strong enough point to have the tank. You can see the old spots here where the German green is, and then the German green is there, so it's not exactly in the same spot as it was before. There's a little bit of dirt and rust underneath here, especially here, so I'm going to push it back and forth and scrape it and maybe give it a bit of a zinc primer or something before I stick it onto the rubber thingies there, just to hopefully stop the rot a little bit so that it doesn't go bad before we change it. Point is that that was a lot less painful than I thought, which is very surprising and very pleasant. Usually things take longer and are more complicated, so vielen Dank, Mercedes. This is the sender, fuel level sender wire, and it goes through the pipe between the frames, so we're just carefully pulling it out now. It takes a while to fish it out and find the right one, so hopefully we can get it out. As usual, we have no idea what we're doing. So we might have to cut the connectors on them. We'll put new connectors on them. Then they won't snag in the pipe. Because it's going to be too long anyway. We need to cut the cable anyway, so. Right, so here comes, ta-da! And now it will reach the tank with plenty of wire to spare. Another 7 o'clock finish. The tank is in position. You saw I painted the bottom where there was a bit of rust. Yeah, it sits fine. There are some ribs underneath here that are perfectly located. There is 4 connections to the tank. There's a feed and a return fuel line, and we need to get new ones of those because the tank is now on the opposite side, so they will be too short. But luckily the vent hose, the breather hose, goes to the center of the truck, so with a little bit of shortcut routing, Kaz has managed to get it to the back of the tank, and the fuel level sender wire goes on the correct side of the truck for this side of the tank, so we actually need to shorten that down a bit, but we're gonna put new connectors on it too, so that should be an easy fix to do. But yeah, it's if we had the fuel hoses we could connect it up tomorrow. We could have done it today.
Yeah,
we've been a bit distracted with other projects like
car washing
and other things.
Pretty good.
Tickety-boo. We have fuel line, which means that it's absolutely useless, coiled up like this. So why don't we put it on the truck where it belongs? And I also have some little eyelets for the fuel gauge sender wire. And hopefully that means that we have everything that we need to connect the tank up. Routing hoses or wires. Another task that in theory is very simple. Again, real life makes things a little bit more complicated. My first tip is that in this case I put the 2 ends of the hoses at the engine, one end acting as the feed line and the other one as the return line. I then routed the looped end to the tank. Once all in place, I could cut the hose in 2 places, and thus I was left with a single leftover piece. Another benefit of this was that the end that I was pushing along the dirty frame was sealed and I didn't collect any dirt. What I've learned over the years is that you rarely get the routing right the first time. So don't be afraid of pulling the hose or the wires back and doing it again. This is not only applicable to the route they take, but also in relation to each other and other wires and hoses nearby. I try to get them all parallel and not crossing each other. Again, this might take a few tries and you usually don't discover the chaos that kickstarts your OCD until things are in place. Pull the wires and hoses out and do it again, but better. Also, don't be afraid of adding zip ties. Put them on loosely first so that you can adjust the hose and wires within the loop. If necessary, cut the zip ties off and add a new one. He died for a noble cause and will be remembered forever. Make sure he's buried in the plastic recycling bin so he can be resurrected for another noble job. After a while, the wires and hoses are in an orderly position, nothing is overlapping, nothing is twisted around them unnecessarily, and the zip ties can be tightened little by little till things are as pretty as they can be. An overall philosophy of mine is that the hose or wire is either tightly fastened so no rubbing can occur, or they are freely hanging in the air so that no rubbing can occur. They say rubbing is racing, except for when it comes to wires, hoses, or massage parlors. As you can see from the time lapse, I spent a long time trying to route the new fuel lines in a good way. This is how they were connected before. They have these expansion thingies or whatever you want to call them. They were there already, so nothing new there. And feed and return line all come in here. I tried to make sure that they are protected and to the side and following the original line, so I've had to take off this bracket and put them underneath there and various things. They go under there and then following under the kind of cross member on that end here. So they come under here, go under this one and to here, and then they follow the original routing is the same as this one here on these brackets and all that stuff into there, and the return one comes from there. So there's actually nothing weird or special about this. The only thing is that it took a long time to get the cross member done. I'll show you that one. The fuel line goes from the tank side and then crosses here. Now one of the problems here was that these pieces of metal here on the frame is quite sharp. So there's a tube here, a tube here, and an inner tube from a bicycle here that is wrapped around this. Then there is another piece of rubber plastic hose here, which is zip tied to the double hoses here. So this here should hopefully provide a fairly good protection against any rubbing, and then it goes up to there, as you can see. But that was the only troublesome piece, and we had to do quite a lot of back and forth to get this to follow in a good manner, and I think this is pretty good. It's pretty protected, so I hope it's going to do well.
I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, so I bought fuel lines with cheap air in instead of expensive diesel. I'm now going to try and fill the lines with fuel before I bleed the system. I think this job is going to suck. am going to bleed the fuel system. So first of all, I need to open this bleed screw on the first filter by about 2 turns. And now I pump on this until I don't see any air. Don't seem to be getting any more air out of that first filter, so I think that one's done. The final thing is to redo the clipping on the fuel hose.
Hopefully that should be it with the relocation of the fuel tank. We can't start it because yeah, the cab's a bit wonky at the moment, but I hope that is now in a position where the cab is down, we can start the truck and drive it around when needed. I think it's worth pointing out too that we are moving the standard tank to the other side to make space for what we're going to put on the other side. This is not the final version tank. This is for now. Hopefully we will have a bigger tank in the future there, but for now we need the space on the drinker's side.
Is that my side?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
You know her. Before we finish the video, we need to hose the truck off a little bit just to make sure that the diesel that's in the wrong place doesn't stay there.
Yep.
Including on you.
Yeah. Bleeding the fuel system was...
Kaz, no laughing. Before we finish the video, Kaz is going to have a shower. Wasn't that what you wanted to say?
No.
Oh. Before we
finish for the day. Things don't work very well in here. I'm covered in diesel and I stink.
Right. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Be in the moment.
Thanks for watching.
I hope to see you in the next one.